coverage this week brought to you by our friends at the Model Lyric, where Britt Floyd will be playing on Thursday night. The music of Pink Floyd, the lights, the sound, all of that beautiful stuff that Luke Jones would love to be a part of at the Model Lyric on Thursday night. But he can't because it's draft night, and he has to send you the WNST text courtesy of Coons 40 Security Boulevard while you're enjoying the music of Britt Floyd. You can do that at Model Lyric, and, of course, Jackson Brown playing next week as well. That's next Thursday night. Luke is here to discuss all things football as I wear my little brigade hat for the Saturday action against the Albany Empire down at the Rofo Arena. But Thursday, Friday, Saturday, this is when it gets hot and bothered, and I tell you what, for all the heat the Ravens take and don't take about creativity and the salary cap and Joe Flacco and the defense and the bad drafts and the good drafts, a whole new wrinkle this week with signing a tender on Willie Snead from New Orleans. Luke, it's so unique, I'm going to let you explain it all. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not terribly unique from the standpoint of we hear about restricted free agents on an annual basis. This happened to be a rare year where the Ravens did not have any of their own, but it's strange from a standpoint of how the process works and how so many teams are typically reluctant to work out one of these deals. But when you have a restricted free agent, basically you can offer that player one of three different tenders if you're the original club, the previous club for that player as he's hitting restricted free agency. You can give a first-round tender, which is more money, but it protects you because any team that signs that player to an offer sheet, first of all, you have a chance to match, and if you don't get it, then it's a first-round pick. Same exact process for a second-round tender, a little less money. You get a second-round compensation if another team signs him and you decide to let him go. In the case of Willie Snead, who's a former undrafted free agent, a guy that was coming off of a down season, only 8 catches for 92 yards, but take a look at what he did the previous 2 years in New Orleans. Caught 69 passes in 2015, caught 72 passes 2 years ago, and was Drew Brees' slot receiver and someone who did a really nice job for them. But fell out of favor last year, was suspended 3 games for DUI, and dealt with a hamstring issue that really kind of allowed him to fall out of the mix in what's a pretty competitive group of pass catchers down in New Orleans. The Saints only gave him the low tender, which is less money, but in the case of a player who is a former rookie free agent, there's no draft compensation tied to it. So we saw this with Cam Meredith, who was the Bears wide receiver, who the Ravens had interest in as well, and he ultimately signed an offer sheet with New Orleans, and the Bears elected not to match that. So then with the Saints having signed Meredith, the Ravens kind of figured, well, they have a shot at signing Willie Snead, and they executed an offer sheet. All indications are pointing to the Saints not matching that. They have until Wednesday officially to say yay or nay. But the deal, it's a 2-year deal. It's worth $7 million, a $2 million signing bonus. There are some incentives thrown in there. But the reason why you don't see these too much beyond the obvious first and second round tenders where, think about it, I mean, very few players are ever going to become a restricted free agent where you'd be willing to give up a first-round pick or even a second-round pick. That's why you don't see that. Where you tend to see it is in this category where they have the low tender, so you say, okay, we'll give it a shot, but in most of these cases, the danger is you end up negotiating a deal that the original team ends up matching, and guess what? You just did all their negotiating for them. You did all the work, and you're not getting the player. So this looks like it's a case like Cam Meredith going to the Saints where it is going to work out. I think Snead is a nice bounce-back candidate. It's not a huge financial commitment, but at the same time...
Well, we have 3 bounce-back candidates now, right?
Then, well, yeah, and I was going to get to that point after I was done kind of giving the spiel of how a rookie or a restricted free agent works, but this is a case of someone who was really productive back-to-back years. He's someone who works in the slot, which we've talked about with Michael Crabtree and John Brown both being more outside receivers. Neither one of them have been particularly accomplished in the slot. So there was a need there with Jeremy Maclin being gone and Michael Campanaro being their other guy that worked in the slot. So I think it makes sense from a skill set standpoint, and I think the one thing you look to with the three receivers, assuming the Snead deal gets done, which, again, it looks like it, because the Saints, it looks like they've kind of moved on. They don't have a ton of cap space. So assuming he's in the fold, they do have from a schematic standpoint, from a matchup standpoint, they have the kind of guys you like from the standpoint that they do different things. However, and this is to the point you made and the point that I made on Friday when this news first came out, you're talking about three receivers who combined a year ago, 87 catches, 1,009 yards, 11 touchdowns, with Michael Crabtree accounting for most of that. I like some of the upside here, and certainly you can see upside with John Brown and Snead both being younger guys, only in their mid-20s. At the same time, they're counting on bounce-back seasons from three different guys. And in any sport, not just football, any sport, when you're talking about you're counting on that many guys to bounce back, that really leaves me in a position that I'm going to remain steadfast in saying just because they've brought in three wide receivers, yes, they've changed up the room. Yes, I think there is some upside there that's nice. I still think wide receiver should be one of their bigger priorities come draft weekend. Maybe it means they're not going to take one in the first round now, but I think it would be a big mistake if they make these three signings and then they say, well, maybe we'll look to take a flyer in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round on a receiver. I think it still needs to be a priority because, one, because it is such a bounce-back proposition with all three of these guys to varying degrees, and two, keep in mind, these aren't exactly long-term deals. Even the Crabtree deal, that's structured in a way that could essentially be a one-year deal the way it's structured. So, Brown's on a one-year deal, Snead's on a two-year deal. These aren't necessarily answers for the long term. You hope that John Brown pops and you re-sign him, and maybe he can be that number one receiver that some people thought he could be in Arizona a couple years ago. You hope that Willie Snead gets back to being where he was a couple years ago, but I still think you need to be looking big picture with another receiver you can bring in on day one or day two, if it's not the first round, second or third round, where most of the depth at the wide receiver position is considered to be in this draft class. And you hope it's someone that can come in and contribute. Certainly you don't want someone to come in and be a non-factor as a rookie, but it takes the pressure off that it doesn't have to be someone who comes in and is the number one receiver, but someone that can contribute and develop and in a year or two, perhaps, dare I say, be that kind of guy that they've been lacking for a long time now, and that means a long-term solution, someone that you could count on to be here for at least the next 4 years. And they haven't had that since Torrey Smith was drafted in 2011, so I think that's far overdue. And, if it turns out to be a number one receiver, great, but at this point, if you can add another receiver in the draft that can develop into at least being a good starting caliber wide receiver over the next year or two, you'd gladly take that.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and, of course, on all things in the castle as we prepare for another draft weekend around here. You'll get the draft information first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. We always bring it out to you first there, as well as Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those great places. All of our coverage also brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast, just like our text service as well. Make sure you're using the app at Royal Farms. Download that thing. Use it when you're pumping your gas there, because I know you're getting your gas at Royal Farms. We all do. You'll get your coffee free. You get your Western fries, fried chicken. My wife brought me home a 3-piece box on Sunday for my hockey and baseball viewing on Sunday on the couch. A little breast to wings and Western fries with ketchup, just the way I like it. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're using that app. You'll get the Western fries for free. Also, the Maryland Jockey Club, Cure the Winter Blues at Laurel. We're going to be going to the Kentucky Derby down at Laurel next Saturday. My wife and I picking out some threads. Love the crab cakes down there as well. It's good times at Laurel. And then, of course, the action moves to Pimlico. Right after that, we're getting you ready for the Pink and the Black-Eyed Susan on the 18th. And the Preakness on the 19th around the Tessio over the weekend. But we got to get ready for Justify and Bob Baffert and the Run for the Roses and all that good stuff. Also, the Modell Lyric, our partners here in crime. Go to modell-lyric.com out on the web to learn more about Brit Floyd on Thursday night, the music of Pink Floyd, as well as Jackson Browne next Thursday. And later on in the fall, Kansas and Steely Dan with some rock and roll. Luke Jones here rocking and rolling through our football coverage, and I guess this is when all of it converges on Thursday night, right? Like we can have all the speculation in the world about who's going where and what's going to happen when they get on the clock. Ozzie always answers all the questions, right? Especially when it's at 16, where if they deal back, you sort of know what they were thinking. If they grab a player like last year with Marlon Humphrey over O.J. Howard, over, a litany of other players, Ragland, a bunch of different people that were out there that they were rumored to. Notice I named all the Alabama guys. It's going to be interesting because I don't want to say they've run from Ridley, right? But I have every reason to believe Ridley could be there at 16, and I have no inkling that they actually would take him or DJ Moore, or that they're that star for a wide receiver, or that they love this center out of Iowa, or that they love the right tackle out of Notre Dame who played with Stanley. I really have no gut on what way they're leaning, and I think they sort of like it that way. And I don't know that they don't have all these guys in a bucket, and we're wrong about all of them.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think you give the Ravens a lot of credit for, even if they haven't picked the right players at certain instances. And we could talk about Perriman, we could talk about Matt Elam and Arthur Brown and go down the list of some of the recent disappointments.
And we have.
They typically do a really nice job of not putting it out there. And, it really serves no purpose. That's why we laugh about the pre-draft press conference being called the Liars Luncheon, and that's why we've seen some of the pre-draft press conferences that other teams, because every team's required to do this. Some teams do theirs a little bit closer to the draft than the Ravens, where they kind of do it about 3.5 weeks out typically. But everything that's out there right now, is there some truth somewhere in all of that garbage that's out there? Yeah, probably. And I can even recall times where Eric DaCosta has said after the fact that, I was actually telling the truth about that guy, but we put out so much vague information or smoke screens, and every team does this, not just the Ravens. But, there are times where I'm not lying about someone, but, it's poker. It really is. Everything that's out there that's leaked to Adam Schefter on down to any local reporter in any given market, you're not trying to spell out what you want to do. You want to spell out and present a specific presentation of what you want to do, I guess.
Well, but beginning with Flacco, they've had us, no one saw Flacco coming, right? And that began, a period of time where I think no one in the media really knows what they're doing. I don't think that they really have gotten the lid on this thing, which is great. I think it's fun. Again, with Thursday night when the chips are up and when the pick goes in, you find out where Ozzie had him stacked on the board now, don't you? Right?
Yeah, there's no question about that. And I think so much of this just goes off of you look at the past. You look at what their patterns have been. You look at schools that they tend to like, Alabama being at the top of the list for obvious reasons. And I think you kind of go off of that.
And Michigan. Throw Michigan in there, too.
Right. But, the one name you mentioned, and if you're asking me to make my official prediction a few days out at this point, if they don't trade back, and I think it's very much a possibility that you're going to see them try to move back. I've never bought that I think they do like Lamar Jackson. I've never bought that they're all that serious about really taking a quarterback in the first round. And I think so many of the circumstances.
Well, if he slips past 15 where Arizona is, right, like in that hole, if there's still the quarterback there at 16, there's definitely a possibility of a deal there, right?
And that's where I think the Ravens it's very clear they floated out there that they like Lamar Jackson. Now, I don't think, like I said, I don't think that's a blatant lie that they don't necessarily like him. I just am not buying, considering all the circumstances, from Flacco's cap number for this year and the dead money that it would involve next year, for a coaching staff that's fighting, presumably coaching for their jobs in 2018, for having a new general manager next year. I mean, there's so many different factors that, to me, just makes it impossible for me to really buy into a quarterback at 16. But if you present interest, then guess what happens if Lamar Jackson falls to that spot? Ring, ring, whether it's New England or whoever you want to talk about that could potentially move up. I think that's what you're trying to cultivate right there. But getting back to my prediction, if they don't move back, if they are picking a player at 16, the guy that I keep coming back to, because they should have a good feel on who he is as a player. He comes from a pro-style offense, which is a big factor at the position. Keep coming back to Mike McGlinchey from Notre Dame. Ronnie Stanley, obviously, they have some good intel talking to him, a former teammate of his. I think you look at Notre Dame with the style of offense they play, their offensive linemen, and you go back to Zach Martin and how successful he's been with Dallas. I mean, probably the best guard in football now, if we're going to, penalize Marshall Yanda for being hurt the last couple years and being another year older. But I think you just look at what they need, and as much as we look at tight end, and I still think a pass-catching tight end is such a priority for them, and I'm still very uneasy that they're going to be able to land someone that is going to help them immediately just because of the nature of that position. We've talked about wide receiver. You can certainly talk about some other positions like linebacker, but I keep coming back to right tackle, and I'm not buying James Hurst being their right tackle without at least some very serious competition. And I think McGlinchey is someone that I think by all accounts profiles to be better at right tackle, even though I think he's a guy that, if Ronnie Stanley gets hurt, you can put him at left tackle if you need to. Certainly Alex Lewis fits into that discussion, as we saw 2 years ago. But McGlinchey, it feels like a clean prospect. Is it a little bit of a reach at 16? Maybe. But if you think he can come in and play as a rookie and play right tackle and do at least a serviceable job in his first year, I think it's something you really have to consider. We've talked so much over the last few years as far as the offensive linemen that they've developed and then seen walk out the door via free agency. This year being Jensen, last year Rick Wagner, the year before that Kelechi Osemele. At some point, it's one thing to say, okay, you're going to draft a left tackle in Ronnie Stanley, but we've talked about it. Marshall Yanda's not getting any younger. We've talked about the names that have walked out the door. Yeah, Alex Lewis, if he can stay healthy, looks like a nice pick in the fourth round. But they're counting on a lot of guys that aren't necessarily high profile to fill some important roles this year, including two starting spots vacated. So I think McGlinchey is the one for me that makes a lot of sense in the first round, and then in the second and third round, you're hoping you can address wide receiver and tight end and come away with a couple guys that can contribute this year, but you're hoping more so can really have some upside to really develop into something that can be really impactful for you in the next year or two. But McGlinchey's the guy that, if I had to guess right now, gun to my head, who are they picking at 16? He's my gut, which probably means they're definitely not picking Mike McGlinchey, going back to our greater point.
Means they're picking a defensive guy who will fall to them in some weird Terrell Suggs kind of way, right? Rokon Smith will fall or something, right?
Yeah. So, who knows?
But that is part of the game, is figuring out who's going to fall, because every year somebody above you takes some guy and you're like, what? Who? That guy wasn't on anybody's radar or whatever. That happened a lot more when Al Davis was alive.
I think the biggest one that I always come back to in the history of this franchise is, Terrell Suggs. Everyone assumed Suggs was going in the top 4 or 5, right? That was just a foregone conclusion. Terrell Suggs was going to be gone in the first 4 or 5 picks. No one even talked about the Ravens taking Terrell Suggs because no one thought he was going to be there. And obviously everything happened with the Leftwich thing and how crazy that was. And the Ravens had to, quote, settle for Terrell Suggs, and 15 years later, you see how that's worked out. It's pretty well. So who knows what's going to happen here? I mean, whether it's Roquan Smith or someone of that nature that falls down the board a little bit. I mean, it's just, you expect the unexpected, especially when you're picking 16. It's easy to try to anticipate what's going to happen when you're picking 5th, 6th, like the Ravens were a couple years ago, but you just you're at the mercy of the rest of the board, and you just hope that when you're on the clock at 16, assuming you're going to pick a player, you're hoping you pick the absolute best player that is available at that point in time, and you really hope that it aligns with something that you need, because very clear, I think we've all talked about from the moment that last season ended, this team needs to have an impactful draft if it's going to get itself back into that tier of teams that you're looking to that isn't just sneaking into the playoffs, but making the playoffs and looking to do some serious damage come January.
It's an important week. It's football week around here. The NFL draft on Thursday night, the Willie Snead story, and, of course, the Ravens on the clock at 16 as we await the weekend. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing. They are doing our Be More Positive community and charity series. Bill Cole's going to be joining me here talking some sports and getting us ready for the draft as well. You can learn more about what they do at ColeRoofing.com, which is take care of commercial and corporate roofing spaces, as well as Pfister Energy, where they teach you how to take your commercial or corporate roof and turn it into a money-making proposition for you with solar. So that's what they do at Pfister Energy. Also brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender at Freedmont.com. Buying, selling, thinking about things. Wherever you are in the marketplace, Freedmont.com is a good place to do that. Costas Inn's a great place to get crabs, great place to get crab cakes and a pit beef in the afternoon. The musical entertainment. I'm going to go down there and take in a game. Hopefully the Caps keep playing for another month. We'll get down there to Costas Inn. I want some crabs. I want to get physical with a mallet and stuff. My son brought me my mom's crab mallet, literally. So I have her old crab mallet that I could take down to Costas and crack some crabs. So I'm into that. Costas Inn, the legend continues. Good enough for today's show. My mom, me, all my life. Get down there and see those good folks. Tell them we said hello from the folks at WNST. The beer's cold there, too. That's why I like it. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.